lived in Ontario his entire life and in the riding of Toronto Centre for the past 7 years. Mark was born in Brockville and was raised in rural Eastern Ontario. He earned a diploma in advertising and public relations at St. Lawrence College in Kingston, Ontario. Mark lives in downtown Toronto with his husband and son and works for Ontario's leading residential property management firm and is working towards his RCM, which is Registered Condominium Manager designation. Mark has a keen interest in community planning and architecture. He is the secretary of BENA, Bloor Street East Neighborhood Association, and vice president of Metro Toronto Condo Corporation 1380. Mark was a first-time Green candidate in the 2011 provincial election. He is a member of the Green Party Shadow Cabinet as critic of the Ministry of Community and Social Services, believing our current multiple system of school boards to be redundant and wasteful to an expense of $1.3 billion annually. Mark, along with the majority of Ontario taxpayers, strongly believes in one publicly funded secular school system for Ontario. Mark was president of the Toronto Centre Constituency Association from 2009 to 2013. He has been a member of the Federal Green Party's Electoral District Association since 2010. Mark is also a member of the 519 Community Centre, Earth Sharing Canada, Greenpeace, Amnesty International, Food Forward, and Cycle Toronto. Mark enjoys learning guitar, French, photography, documentary films, and Coronation Street. You have many fellow fans, because I know there's people out there who watch that. I need to say with this presentation that this is kind of a unique presenter for us in the sense that Pure Ontario is a nonpartisan organization. And typically when we invite someone from one of the parties, we usually try to be fair about it and invite representatives from the other parties. But we broke from that tradition this time because of the topic of what he's speaking about, and that is the funding of a one school system in Ontario. A topic that none of the other major parties will touch. And we know that from experience, meeting with these politicians and trying to talk about this. So, but this is one party that's actually made it a platform, and we've invited Mark here to share with us their research on that and how they came to that conclusion. Mark Daye, everyone.
Thank you. Hopefully this technology will work. So far, so good. So the title of my presentation is Reducing Waste and Ensuring Fairness in Our Schools. And our slogan for this issue that we've been using is One Ontario, One School System. And I believe our Premier of late has been using the phrase One Ontario without the one school system. So that just sort of backs up what things said. Thank you for that introduction. I feel a bit inadequate following these great speakers. Full disclosure here, I'd like to, it's a bit ironic that I'm here as part of an educational discussion. I'm a high school dropout. And I'm also a recovering Catholic and devout atheist. So just so everyone knows that up front. So let's try this. Here we go. One school system. I'm going to talk about 6 different areas. A bit of history, how we got to where we are, discrimination in human rights, the Constitution, some opinions, and some financial aspects of the arguments. So first, some history. Historically in Ontario, there was discrimination against the Catholic minority. Conversely, in Quebec, there was discrimination against the Protestant minority. At the time of Confederation, an agreement was made, and that's essentially how we ended up where we are today. Separate schools were mandated by the government at the time of Confederation to protect children from discrimination in Ontario, specifically that would be Catholic children, and to support the values of the Catholic community. Again, in Quebec, the opposite. A bit on human rights. In my opinion, the Ontario government's continued funding of separate schools is fundamentally a human rights issue. Again, we'll get into the financial aspects a bit more later, but the reason I feel passionate about this issue is because it's a human rights issue and we have a discriminatory system. In that, a publicly funded school system dedicated to the indoctrination of the religious beliefs of one faith group, that being the Catholic group, to the exclusion of all others, is a violation of the Canadian Charter of Rights. Just to be clear on this, there is actually one small school district in Penetanguishene, which is a Protestant school district. Often you'll hear that we have 4 school boards. There isn't a 5th, but I think it's just for simplicity of language and that sort of thing. I call it government sanctioned discrimination. As Nick pointed out, the other parties will not touch this issue, and it's very true, they won't. So that's my opinion. We also have opinions from none other than the United Nations. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has twice censured Ontario for human rights violations regarding the funding of separate schools. The first was in 1999, and the second was in 2005, when they stated that Canada had failed to adopt steps in order to eliminate discrimination on the basis of religion in the funding of schools in Ontario. Of course, Canada and Ontario have ignored the United Nations. So as you know, we still have Catholic schools being funded. Enrollment and employment. Catholic schools, although publicly funded, can deny enrollment and employment based on faith. I believe it's up to grade 8 they can deny enrollment, and then in high schools they are open. But the fact of the matter is it's public money, it's my tax dollars, and again, as I say, as a practicing atheist and a gay man, I really don't like my money going to fund Catholic propaganda. So what this means is 1/3 of teaching jobs in the province of Ontario are not available to 2/3 of teachers. I happen to know personally 2 teachers that teach in the Catholic school boards who are gay, who stay in the closet for fear of losing their jobs. And I actually had the privilege of interviewing one of them for a project that I was working on this issue. And ultimately we couldn't do it because of fear of him losing his job. He backed out. So this is a very real situation that we're living in, and it's my tax dollars and your tax dollars that are funding it. Which leads me to the constitutional cop-out, as I like to call it. Whenever I talk about this with other politicians and government officials and the like, I always get, well, it's mandated by the Constitution and blah, blah, blah. Canada's Constitution does mandate funding of Catholic education. That is true. However, a constitutional amendment would only require the agreement between Ottawa and Queen's Park, the province of Ontario, the government of Canada. Newfoundland and Labrador have done it, and Quebec has also done it. And I believe in further research, I may have one of those years wrong, but they have done it, so it can be done. Newfoundland and Labrador used to fund all the different types of schools, and they realized that this was unsustainable financially, which was why John Tory is not an elected official right now. So, Ontario, we're still discriminating. So, in fairness, I thought, since I was unusually the only party being represented here, I would bring some words from some of my colleagues. Glenn Murray, the MPP for Toronto Centre, who's an openly gay man, said in November to Extra magazine when he was running to be leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario, and I quote, "It is this basic kind of right that is protected only by the Constitution, and we should not give it up, and we should be careful about trampling on the rights of others." So, in his opinion, Catholic school funding is a right. Kathleen Wynne, who, as we know, loves to have conversations about everything under the sun, I like to call her Conversation Kathleen, says, "I'm not prepared at this point to pitch us into a a huge conflict about the historical establishment of our school system." This was before she was premier, about a week or two, I believe. When asked what he would say to a Protestant, Muslim, or Jewish parent questioning the obvious inequity he was quite clear. Is it a legitimate concern? Absolutely. Would he do anything to fix it? No, says Tim Hudak to Chris Selly of the National Post. However, I will say I have respect for Tim Hudak. At least we know where he stands, and he's quite blunt about it. I have one more. This isn't a quote. However, Andrea Horvath, she ordered her MPPs not to participate in a forum being held at Oise, where the NDP's Socialist Caucus was to debate whether the province should end public funding of Catholic schools. Finally, I have a quote from Mike Schreiner, leader of the Green Party of Ontario, who says, merging the best of the Catholic and public school boards into one publicly funded system will save over $1 billion annually. I've got 3 different studies that show slightly different figures than that, but it's over $1 billion. It is a fiscally responsible thing to do and is more effective than attacking democratic labor rights. This was last year to the Huffington Post when we were having some issues with schools, teachers. One last quote. Let's work on making our good education system the best in the world. One publicly funded secular school system will help end discrimination and ensure our success for future generations. And the person who said that is me. So this part here is quite important, funding versus support, and I chose the title of this slide very deliberately because this graphic here is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation tax form. Anybody who has paid property taxes will be familiar with it. On there, you choose English public, English separate, French public, French separate. Which do you support? It has nothing to do with funding. This is very important and it is very misleading, and I feel it is very intentionally misleading because some people like it that way. It determines which trustee you vote for. The fact is that all Ontario taxpayers fund public education, and when I say public education, I mean our public schools, as they're often called, and Catholic schools. Money is distributed to all boards via the education funding formula, which is primarily based on enrollment, which also sometimes affects whether or not a student who's not a Catholic gets to go to a Catholic school. For example, if a school has declining enrollment and the people running that school maybe don't want it to close. I'm just saying. Again, the declaration on your impact form does not affect funding, and this is really important, and it's so many people think it does. And the word support is really misleading there. Studies have shown that we can save between 1.3 and 1.6. This is the Civil Rights in Public Education newsletter. In here they have 3 different studies quoted with 3 very similar amounts, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.3. They're all separate studies, but similar. So we could save money by reduced transportation costs, bulk buying of school supplies, reduction in physical assets, and consolidation of administration. We would need fewer schools, we wouldn't be busing kids to the other side of town, for example, all that sort of thing. So some people will say, why change now? We've been this way for 146 years. Why not keep it as it is? I say to that, there are many ways our education system has changed over the years, and I think a good education system should constantly be evolving. We used to retrain children who were left-handed. I missed that one, I'm still left-handed. We used to have school boards based on race. This was something I just found out recently, actually. We used to have Christian prayer in our public schools. I remember that. I say let's move forward, let's create a 21st century school system that treats every student, every parent, every teacher, and every support worker equally and with respect and with dignity. As I'm wrapping up, I would like to offer you some resources. I mentioned Civil Rights in Public Education. They put out a newsletter, lots of information on this topic. That's their website. There's also oneschoolsystem.org, the GPO website, and my website. I've compiled lots of past media links and things like that. I urge you to get involved. This is another resource, Humanist Perspectives magazine from the summer of 2010, issue 173. There's a great article in here. It's entitled Canada's Dirty Little Secret, Getting Schooled in Ontario. And I still say that looks like Kate Middleton, although my husband over here disagrees. So we have a petition at the Green Party of Ontario website. I urge you to visit and sign it and share it. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow the Smarter Schools Twitter account, which is One on One School, which only tweets about this issue. Lastly, write to your MPP, demand change, and tell them what you feel. And my last slide is just to say thank you to the 519, Queer Ontario, to Extra, to Nick, and to all my fellow panelists. And thank you for coming out tonight and taking part.